Sunak has made a dramatic U-turn with his £15 billion plan to ease the cost of living crisis. That includes giving every home a £400 energy bill discount in October.
The Chancellor said the government will take additional tax from the oil and gas giants to fund what he's calling an energy profits levy.
Well, the last time he was on our programme, he told us the reasons he was against a windfall tax.
Many people watching will say, look, why don't you just do that? We don't like oil companies, let's tax them even more. So the reason we haven't done that is because I think for all our energy security, it would be better if we had more investment. And so I want to make sure we unlock that investment, don't scare it off.
No. So we were speaking to the Chancellor then. He joins us now this morning. It's great to have him with us. Good morning to you, Mr. Sunak.
Good morning.
That was you just a month or so ago on this programme saying that you weren't going to be using this windfall tax. Obviously, there's been a big change in tone and you've done this U-turn. Labour have been calling for this for about 5 months. The Lib Dems started in October last year. Why have you finally decided that this is the right thing to do?
Well, I've always been pragmatic about this, and if you look at that clip that you just showed, you'll see that what I was talking about was investment. And what we've done is design a new levy that, yes, it taxes the extraordinary profits of these energy companies fairly, and I think that's something that is right to do, but it does it by also incentivising investment, because what we've created is a brand new, very generous investment relief, so that the more these companies invest, the less tax that they pay. And as that clip said, that was a thing I was focused on, because investment is good for us. It's good for our economy, it's good for jobs, and it's good for our long-term energy security. And that's why we've taken the time to get the balance right between both of those things, and I think we've found the right place.
So did that just come to you late on Wednesday night to announce that yesterday? Why yesterday did you suddenly have that solution to the dilemma?
Well, no, it's something that we've been working on for a while. As you would imagine, these things take time to design and think through properly, and that's what we've been doing. In terms of the timing more broadly for the announcements, the reason for that, as I've always said, and I said that consistently from February and March on, that I stood ready to do more to support people, but we wanted to wait until we had a bit more certainty and clarity about what would happen to energy bills in the autumn so that we could appropriately size the support that we were going to put in place and make sure that it was commensurate with the challenge that people were facing.
You can see why people like me might be questioning the timing, because it did come straight after the Prime Minister speaking and apologising about the things that were revealed. Finally, we got to see the Sue Gray report. And it does look to many people, even though I'm sure the people that are getting the money might not mind, it does look like it was a big moment to distract from that.
No, it's absolutely not driven by that. As I was saying, energy prices in the autumn are the biggest driver of people's increased bills, and it was right that we waited until we had some more clarity on that. We just heard this week from Ofgem, the independent regulators that set the price cap, what their expectation of energy bills would be in the autumn. So that actually gives us the ability to, as I said, size our support appropriately. And yesterday was also the last day that Parliament was sitting before the recess for the Jubilee next week. And it's important that I make these announcements in Parliament, so that I'm held accountable. I think the other thing is worth bearing in mind. I was just talking to one of your colleagues, Martin Lewis, very recently, and actually he was urging me, and he said, he gets that I want to have clarity, but he also said it would be good if people could have reassurance on what's coming, just to remove some of the anxiety that they're facing. So I thought actually it was a good idea to try and provide that as soon as I could, once I knew what I needed to know.
Whatever the real reason for delivering it yesterday, our viewers, lots of them are very pleased that you did, whether it's come forward or it has been arrived at the right time, that you have delivered this package. There are a lot of people that are going to benefit from this package, though, that don't need it. Kate, myself, yourself, of course. There's lots of people that will get this £400 that don't actually need the £400. And there is some suggestion that perhaps we could have targeted that a little bit better at those that do. There's some of our viewers getting in touch saying they're just above the benefits mark. This is really not going to help them as much as it needs to help them. Why are we receiving the benefit, Mr. Sunak?
Well, first of all, yesterday's announcements were very targeted on the most vulnerable. 3/4 of the £15 billion of support that we announced goes to our most vulnerable households. That's a third of all households that will receive the most support, worth around £1,200 over the course of the year between the announcements we've made. That's very significant, and I think it will make a meaningful difference. And it's been recognised as such by many independent bodies and respected bodies who have said, actually, that it is well targeted and will provide significant support for the poorest households in our society. But I recognise that many people are struggling with the scale of the price increases that we're seeing, and that's why we wanted to have a more universal element of the support we were providing. Because, whilst we can't solve this problem in its entirety for everyone, of course we can't, no government could, I wanted people to realise that we are on their side during these challenging months, and that we did want to do what we could to ease some of the burden. And that's why, whether it was the £150 council tax rebate that is already being delivered or the new £400, that £550 will make a significant amount of support to tens of millions of families.
You're not wrong, Chancellor, not wrong at all. I guess my point was there are people that, fortunately aren't struggling and they don't need this extra £400. As grateful as we all are to be receiving it, why specifically have you not been able to sort of take them out of the equation? Or is it just because that's just too complicated?
So you're right, and there will be some people like myself, as you say, and I'm sure you'll join me in giving that money to charity. And now we have a couple of choices when you're trying to deliver support to tens of millions of people. We either have the council tax system or we have the energy bill system. Now, if we had done this through the council tax system, I'm fairly certain, and we've done it by bands, which is something that we've done before, I'm sure that I'd be sitting here answering questions from you with case studies from your viewers about someone who just missed out or happened to live in a band E or F property and felt that they were deserving of support. And you'd be asking me, why are they not getting it? And so, given the scale of the challenge and how many people are affected by this, I thought it was best to err on the side of being as universal as possible, given the choices we have about how to deliver this type of support.
So looking ahead, some have said this is just a sticking plaster because we know there's more trouble coming down the line, more price rises, inflation increasing. Welcome, though, a sticking plaster is when you're trying to deal with a wound in the home. But, what about further down the line? So you've got big borrowings coming up, haven't you? Benefits and pensions are going to be uprated next year in line with inflation, as they always are, but inflation may reach 10% by the autumn. We're talking about huge amounts of borrowing. Does it feel strange to be a Conservative Chancellor who is putting up taxes, increasing borrowing, and indeed taking on something that looks very similar to a policy that the Labour Party have been calling for?
Well, as we've addressed the energy levy, and as I said, it's very different to the policy the Labour Party were proposing, because our policy incentivises business investment, and that's good for us. I don't think it's fair to describe it as a sticking plaster. The total support we've announced is £37 billion to help British people with the cost of living challenges that they're facing. I don't think anyone can say that is an incredibly significant support. It's right that that's targeted on the most vulnerable, with them receiving up to £1,200 of support.
Indeed,
actually, next year,
I just want to ask about how it's going to be funded further on, because there's more coming down the line, isn't there?
Next year, and this is important for people to have that reassurance, the way our system works, and that's part of the challenge we've had this year, is next year, people's benefits and pensions are likely to be uprated by an inflation number that is based on this year's very high numbers, and it will be significantly higher than the inflation and the increase in bills that people actually experience next year. And so that's actually coming, and that's something that people can have reassurance will happen for them next year. But the support we've announced yesterday and before will help get them from here to there.
It's a solid sticking plaster. My question is, for someone that's always argued that we have to look at investment and look at how to pay for things down the line, and it's usually Labour that we're asking to cost. What are you going to do to cost that? And also, how are you going to get that investment in quickly from those companies?
Well, we actually already have in place something called the super deduction, which is something I announced last year, and it runs through to next year, something I think may well have been opposed by the Labour Party. And what that is again, a very generous incentive for businesses to invest in the economy. And what I've already committed to do is that when that temporary generous investment relief expires next spring, we will replace it with something that is more permanent, that continues to incentivise business investment. And even though that sounds like an abstract thing, business investing in our country and our economy is good for our long-term growth. It drives up our productivity, it drives up our wages, it creates more jobs, and ultimately that growing economy is how over time we can create a more prosperous society. That's the best way to deal with cost of living challenges, the best way for families to have a better life. So that's all part of our plan to grow the economy, and you'll hear more from me on that in the autumn.
OK.
But thank you very much for having me.
One last thing, if I may, Chancellor, because it's great that we got you on the programme this morning. Your announcement yesterday, gratefully received by lots of our viewers, did come off the back of the Sue Gray report, regardless of the timing of it. Lots of questions about the failing of leadership within Number 10, which allowed this culture of partying and excess. I'm sure you've read and have been very dismayed by some of the reaction of some of those members of the Number 10 staff that were rude to cleaners and security. You yourself has taken a fixed notice penalty as well, of course. We had one of our viewers on yesterday, Louise Bennett. I'd just like you to play a clip from the interview we played with her regarding her son, Fred, who was 14, sadly died from leukemia and had to be buried during the pandemic, during lockdown, only allowed to have 8 people at that funeral. None of his friends and family could be there other than the closest 8. There was no one allowed back to the house afterwards. This was her reaction to the question about whether Boris Johnson should stay as the leader and the Prime Minister.
I think he has to go. There's no way he can have any moral authority to lead the country. He was responsible for everything that happened in his house. And he has apologised, but I have told my children enough times that an apology has to mean something. And this one doesn't, because for that apology to be sincere, he has to understand why we're upset, and he doesn't.
So Louise doesn't feel he has any moral authority to lead this country. What's your take on what Louise's perspective is on this and what happened at Number 10?
Well, I'm sorry Louise feels like that, and I know the Prime Minister is deeply sorry for what happened, and he's taken full responsibility for it, and importantly, as he said recently, has learnt the lessons from the events that have happened and made changes to the way that Downing Street has run, and is now committed even more than previously, doubled down on his resolve to deliver for the British people. He feels a great sense of responsibility to do that, and he has my full.
Lead the party?
And he has my absolute full support in delivering that. Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable having, you know, the Prime Minister, the person that governed and created that culture at Number 10? Are you comfortable with him being the leader?
I fully support the Prime Minister. He was right to apologise. He's right to have taken responsibility. He's right to have made the changes that he had. And as I say, I see him every day. He's enormously committed to delivering for the British people. And that's what we collectively in government are getting on with.
OK,
and
thank you very much for letting us.
Was about.
Yeah, thank you for letting us keep you a little bit longer to put that point. And I hope you understand why we felt it was important that Louise could share her opinion with you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.